Hi, this is Bri, and this is going to be the video for the lab homework 3. Um, Once again, I've kind of rearranged a bunch of stuff just to not inconvenience my patient as much. So I've got him starting out in prone, and then we're going to move on to supine, and then, so on and so forth. So I'm going to be jumping around a bit. All right, but we're going to get started. Hi, I'm Bri.
Hi, Bri.
And I'm going to be a student PTA, and we're going to do some goniometry and some manual muscle testing on these today, okay?
Okay.
All right. So the first thing I need you to do is lay on your stomach and face this way, your head this way. Okay. First thing that we are going to measure is hip extension. The axis is going to be here over the greater trochanter. The stationary arm is going to be the lateral midline of the pelvis, or trunk really, and the moving arm is going to be down the lateral midline of the femur, and we're going to use the lateral epicondyle here as a reference point. So I'll go ahead and do that. So I'm going to passively flex or extend your hip just to see what your range of motion is. Okay. And can you do that range of motion for me? Okay. Oh, go back down. Right there. Okay. I stopped him because he was starting to lift off the table a little bit, so this is going to be his true end range. Okay. And it looks like he got to about 20 degrees of extension, which normal is about to 30, so he is lacking just a little bit. Next one is going to be the manual muscle test for hip extension. So he's also in prone for this, and we're going to be doing a grade 5. So what I need you to do, and we can do a test run. So I'm going to stabilize at the pelvis here, and then can you lift your leg off the table again? And now I'm just going to push resistance through his, if you can see, through his distal femur here, just to see if he can resist max resistance. And he could. So he is a 5 out of 5 for that. Next one is going to be the manual muscle test for knee flexion, also a grade 5. And once again, I'm going to need to stabilize the pelvis just to prevent him from going too far into lumbar extension. So, Mr. Augustine, what I'm going to need you to do for this one is to flex your knee, but keep your, there we go. So you can straighten this out a little bit and go back down. So that's the movement I need you to do, okay?
Okay.
So what we can do for this one is we can actually get on the back side. So can you flex your knee? And then we're going to resist on the posterior side of the ankle. We're just going to pull toward us. So don't let me unbend your knee, okay? And he resisted. So he is a 5 out of 5. Okay, so for the next few, we're going to flip and we're going to be on your back. Okay, the first one is going to be goniometry for hip flexion. So if you can get more on the table, like get your knees on the table. There you go. Okay. So the axis is going to be the greater trochanter. Basically, all of the landmarks are the same as for hip extension. So it's going to be, the axis is going to be the greater trochanter. The stationary arm is going to go up the pelvis and the trunk, and the moving arm is going to be going down the femur, and also using the lateral epicondyle here as a reference point. Okay, so this one, what we're going to do, you can flex your knee while I'm doing this, but basically what we're going to do is this motion right here. Okay, so go ahead and get set up. Putting it through pressure. So he got to about 120 degrees of flexion, and normal is 120. So he's got all of his flexion in his hip. All right, next one is going to be the goniometer for knee flexion. Axis here is actually going to be at the lateral epicondyle, so basically we're just switching joints. And the stationary arm is going to be the other way, so we're going to be going down the femur and using the greater trochanter as the reference point. And then for the moving arm, we're going to go down the lower leg, the fibula, and using the lateral malleolus as the reference point. Okay. So do that motion for me again. So he actually does have a lot of knee flexion. He actually made it to 140 degrees, and that's pretty much the max normal range. You can be within 130 to 140 to be considered normal. Okay, the next one we're going to do is knee extension, same position, supine, and the axis, stationary arm, and moving arm are all the same, but axis is going to be the lateral epicondyle. Stationary arm is going to go down the femur using the greater trochanter as a reference point, and then going down the fibula and using the lateral malleolus as a reference point as well. The thing that's different about this one is whenever they are extending, this one might be a little difficult because I don't necessarily have a table that is long enough, but yeah, he's having to hang off. I'm really sorry. But so what I'll do is I'll place a towel underneath his ankle here to be sure to, you know, even him out a little bit, just so that we can see if he does actually have any hyper extension. He's trying to balance himself, I'm sorry. But so we can actually see if he does have any hyperextension here by giving him the room to do that. Okay. So this is just the movement that we're doing, and you look pretty straight, so I don't think you have any hyperextension either. But we are going to measure. No. He it has 0 degrees of extension. So that is good. And I think you can put yourself just back on the table where you're comfortable. Okay, next one is going to be a manual muscle test for hip internal rotation. And this is going to be for a grade 2. So what we're going to do is we're going to passively externally rotate his hip, and the instruction is going to be just to roll his leg inward. So if you can flatten up your knees. Okay. Can you scoot up a little bit?
This way?
Yeah, just to get more of your legs actually on the table. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm passively externally rotating his leg. So basically I'm rolling it towards me. And, okay, what I'm going to need you to do is just roll your leg inward, okay? So, keep this flat. Okay, and just, alright, perfect. So, his trunk was starting to rotate a little bit, so had to stabilize at the pelvis to keep him from cheating, basically. But he was able to do it in a gravity minimized position, so he is at least a grade 2. And now we're going to switch and do the manual muscle test for hip external rotation, which is basically the opposite. So I'm going to roll his leg inward, and the command is going to be to see if he can roll his leg outward. So basically the same thing. Okay. You roll your leg out. Okay. And I am palpating here, and I did feel the piriformis firing. So he is at least a grade 2 since he was able to do that as well. Okay. Next one is going to be the manual muscle test for hip internal rotation. We're just going to test for grade 5 this time. So we're done laying flat, and all you need to do is just sit on the edge of the table. Okay. So for the grade 5, you do need to stabilize at the pelvis of whatever side that you are testing, just to prevent cheating again. So we are going to we're going to resist through the ankle, and we're going to resist inward. So what you're going to do is you're going to do this motion, and then I'm going to try and push your leg in down here at your ankle. So I'll grab this. Sorry. Okay. Go ahead and do that motion. Okay. Oh my god, I don't know which direction. Okay. Okay. So it looks like he was able to maintain. So he is at least a grade 5. Okay. And now we're going to do the other one, the external rotation, also for grade 5. Basically the opposite of what we just did. So you're going to do this motion here, and I'm going to try and pull your leg out. Okay? So I'm stabilizing at his pelvis. Okay, so go ahead and do that motion. Okay, and he was able to hold at max resistance, so he is a grade 5. Next one is going to be the goni for hip internal rotation. The axis is going to be the front of the patella here, the anterior patella, and the stationary arm is going to be straight down, perpendicular to the floor, and the moving arm is going to be along the tibial crest here, and the moving arm is going to be the midpoint here between the malleoli. So hopefully we can do this. Okay. So internally rotate is going to be this way. Whatever you like. Okay. He actually only got 30 degrees of internal rotation. Normal is 45, so he is lacking just a little bit. For hip external rotation, basically the opposite again. This normal range of motion is also 45. All the axis, stationary arms, and moving arms are also the same. So anterior patella, stationary arm is going to be perpendicular to the floor, and the moving arm is going to be midway between the malleolus. Okay. So this one, perfect. Try not to lift your leg off the table, purely just try and do this motion. He's trying to get a little more degrees by lifting his foot. Okay, so that one, he is almost at normal range of motion. He has about 42 degrees of external rotation. So that one's a little more normal. Next one is going to be the manual muscle test for hip flexion. We are testing for a grade 5, and we're going to stabilize at the pelvis, and we may change position for this one because he can hold the side of the table if he wants some extra stability. So you are allowed to hold on, okay? We'll try it and we'll see if it works.
Harry.
Sorry.
Harry.
So what we're going to do is we are solely going to have the patient flex his knee, and then I'm going to resist at his distal femur here. So that's just the movement. So go ahead and do it. Okay. He was able to resist maximal pressure, so he is at least a 5 out of 5 for hip flexion. Okay. Home stretch. All right. Next one is going to be the manual muscle test for knee extension. This one is also going to be testing for a grade 5. The important thing with this one, whenever we are extending his knee, we don't want it completely extended to eliminate that lockout mechanism. So he does seem to have all of his muscles that are working because he is able to lock it, but we're just going to let it down just a little bit, and then we are going to resist at the proximal ankle here, just above where your malleolus are. Okay, so not locked, and don't let me move you. Perfect. Okay, so he was able to resist, so he is a 5. Next one is going to be the manual muscle test for knee extension, and for the rest of the ones that we're doing, I'm going to need you laying on your side. Thank you. Okay. So, oh shoot, this one's going to be kind of complicated. Okay. I'm going to attempt to give him the camera to try and film the rest of this as best as possible. Okay, so what I'm going to do for knee extension, I'm going to try and get behind him a little bit just so that I can hold his test leg. And then I'm going to test in a gravity minimized position if he can extend his knee. Okay, so you want one hand under the knee and the other hand supporting the ankle and foot. So, and you don't want to initiate any kind of movement at all. So, Mr. Augustine, can you extend your leg? Perfect. So I'm not doing anything, I'm merely just holding his leg. So since he can go through the full range of motion, it is a grade 2. Okay. And I believe the next one is just knee flexion in a grade 2. Yeah, so basically what she just did. So it's the same exact position. So whenever you can test these at the same time. So Mr. Augustine, can you extend your leg again? Okay. And can you flex your knee? Perfect. So once again, not initiating any kind of movement, just merely holding his leg. And since he was able to do both of those in a gravity minimized position, both of those would have been considered a grade 2. Okay. Next one is going to be the manual muscle test for hip extension for grade 2. What I'm going to do is I'm going to support, for the next two actually, hip extension and hip flexion for both grade 2. I'm going to support the non-testing leg, and I'm going to see if he can go through the range of motion for extension and flexion for his hip in a gravity minimized position. So we'll do these at the same time, hip extension first, and then I'll go into the command for hip flexion. So, Mr. Augustine, we are actually going to be testing this leg. So I'm going to hold this one for you. So can you slide your leg out? Okay, so that's knee flexion, or that's hip flexion. So yeah, can you slide your leg behind you? Okay. So since he was able to go through the range of motion with hip extension, can you tilt the camera down just a little bit? Yeah. So he was able to get his leg behind him. Here, hand it to me. I'm really sorry. So
oh, that's my bad.
he has it behind him. So now can you bring your knee to your chest? Okay. So can you do that one more time for me so that... Perfect. So since he was able to do both of those, I'm going to put your leg down. Since he was able to do both of those in a gravity minimized position, both of those are considered a grade 2 for hip extension and hip flexion. Did I say knee extension? I meant hip extension and hip flexion. But that is it. Bye.